Masechet Sotah Daf Yod Daled. We are going to complete the first perek, an agadot about Moshe and his burial place, and then we will begin the second perek, which gets into the details of the mincha offering of the Sotah. So we begin Vayikbod oto bagai be'eres Moab mul bet peor. That Hashem buried Moshe, and it gives us some details of the place. Amar Rabbi Berechia, siman betoch siman, v'afilu hachi v'lo yada ish et keburato. Rabbi Berechia points out that even though we have two indications, a double indication, that it was in the valley of Eretz Moab, and also near or opposite Bet Peor. So you think if you have two locations, then you'd be able to triangulate and find the burial place. But the point is, even so, nobody knows where Moshe is buried, even to this day. And in fact, the Roman evil government already sent a messenger to the garrison, to the soldiers at Bet Peor, and asked them, show us where Moshe is buried. Right? You live there in Bet Peor, we want to know where it is. Why was the Roman government interested to know where Moshe is buried? Perhaps they wanted to desecrate his grave, or because they thought it was good luck, or whatever reason. Amdu lema'la nidme lahem lemata. Lemata nidme lahem lema'la. So these soldiers go out on an expedition to look for the grave of Moshe, and when they stood up on top of a mountain, they looked down and they could see, oh, it looks like it's down below. And so they would go travel down below, and then it seemed like it was higher up. In other words, it was some kind of optical illusion. That they did see something, but they couldn't get to it. Wherever they went, it seemed like it was in the opposite direction. So they had a brilliant idea. Let's split up into two groups. One go up, one go down. So then surely we'll find it. But that also didn't work. The ones that were above, it still seemed like it was below them, and the soldiers that went down, it still seemed like it was above them. It was kind of like an Escher painting, where everything is relative, and you don't know what's up and what's down. And so this is just permanently impossible to find, and that's why the pasuk says, and nobody knows where Moshe is buried to this day, right? It seems that the Torah is emphasizing this so that nobody would go and deify him and turn his grave into a site of idolatry, or, on the other hand, desecrate his burial site if they were against the Jews. And so this was a good protection that nobody knows where it is. Rabbi Chama Rabbi Hanina Amar. Af Moshe Rabbeinu eno yodeh hechan kavur. Rabbi Chama says, even Moshe himself did not know where he would be buried. Ketiv acha v'lo yada ish et kiburatoch v'it uchtiv hatam v'zo taberacha sheberach Moshe ish ha-Elohim. We make a gezerah shava of ish to ish, that ish does not know where he's buried. Literally, it means nobody, no person knows where he's buried, but it happens to be that Moshe himself is called ish, a man of God, and so this is referring to Moshe himself that will not know where he's buried. Also, he's been saying all these derashot in the series. He says, how come he's buried? Why does the Torah say that he's buried opposite Bet Peor? What does Bet Peor have to do with it? So this is to give us a message that he is so he can atone for the sin at Bet Peor. That's when the Midianite woman came and seduced the Bnei Israel, and terrible sin happened, and terrible punishment. And so to remember that downfall, and for Moshe's presence to continually atone for and remember that sin, that's why it says Moshe is buried permanently opposite Bet Peor, right? That's like a constant reminder of that terrible scene, and a need to atone for it always. Same sage continues. What does it mean that you should follow and you should walk in God's ways? How can you do that? How can you walk after Shekhinah? After all, Hashem is analogized, if anything, to a consuming fire, which a person cannot even approach it. So how can a person go and walk in God's ways? That's impossible. So it means it's not literally you can't walk in God's ways physically, but rather one should follow God's attributes. And actions. Mahu malbish arumim dichtiv vayas Adonai Elohim le'adam ulishto kotnot or vayalbishem afata halbesh arumim. Just like Hashem gives clothing to those who are in need, as it says, Hashem made for Adam and his wife garments of skin, and he clothed them. They were in need of clothes. Therefore, if someone cannot afford clothing, one should provide for them. What does that? What else does Hashem do? He visits the sick. When Abraham was sick, Hashem appeared to him at Elonei Mamre. So too, we should, if we want to walk in God's ways, we should also go and visit the sick. HaKadosh Baruch Hu nichem avadim dichtiv vayecharei mot Abraham vayibarech Elohim et Yitzchak beno af ata nachem avadim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu kabar metim dichtiv vayikbor oto bagai af ata kebor metim. Hashem goes and comforts the mourners. As it says, after the death of Abraham, Hashem went and blessed Yitzchak. Why is he blessing Yitzchak after the death of Abraham? Because Yitzchak was in mourning. Hashem went to visit him and cheer him up, give him a blessing. And so too, Hashem buries the dead, right? This is a great mitzvah. If you want to walk in Hashem's ways, right? Join the Chevra Kadisha and go and bury the dead. As it says regarding Moshe, Vayikbor. There's no subject to this noun, so and nobody knows where it is. So obviously, this must be referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu buried Moshe, and so we should do the same. Beautiful midrash. Kotnot or. You mentioned here that Hashem made for Adam and Chava garments of skin. What does that mean? Rav Ushmuel chad amar davar haba min haor vechad amar davar she'aor neneh mimenu. One opinion is, again, Rav and Shmuel, we have a few machalokot between them, and we don't know who says which one. But anyway, one of them says that the garments were made out of skin, or made out of leather, or you could also say wool, because wool is from the skin or covering of an animal. And the other opinion says, no, it was garments for the skin, for their skin, that would cover their skin and protect it. But it wasn't necessarily made out of skin. Torah should be some like Torah, techilata gemilut chasadim, sofa gemilut chasadim. Techilata gemilut chasadim tichtiv. Vayas Hashem Elokim laAdam ulishto kotnot or vayalbishem v'sofa gemilut chasadim tichtiv vayikbor oto bagai. Rabbi Simlai, similar theme to what we saw before, says the Torah begins and ends with acts of kindness. It begins with the act of kindness that Hashem made clothing for Adam and Chava, and it ends with an act of kindness that Hashem buried Moshe, right? So that's the beginning, that's the end, and therefore that's the primary theme of the entire Torah. Darash should be semlai. Mipnei man nitava Moshe Rabbeinu likanes Eretz Yisrael v'chi le'echol mepriyahu sarich ol lisbo mitubahu sarich ela kach amar Moshe harbe mitzvot nistavu Yisrael ve'en mitkayemin ela be'eretz Yisrael ekanes ani la'aretz kedesh sheyitkayemu kulan al yadi. Continuing with Rabbi Simlai's derashot, he says, how come Moshe wanted so much to get into Eretz Yisrael? What, he needed to eat its fruit, or to be satiated from its goodness, from the milk, the honey, right? Is that why? Because he really needs to have a milky, a yogurt, right? What's the big deal? Moshe is so in need of this of food. Rather, no, it's not for the material benefit of Eretz Yisrael, which is also there is, but rather for the spiritual benefit. Moshe said there's so many mitzvot that one can do only in Eretz Yisrael and cannot be fulfilled outside of the land. So he wants to go so we can fulfill all of the mitzvot that are dependent on the land. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא כאילו מתן מבקש אלא לקבל שכר מעלה עליה אני עליך כאילו עשיתם שנאמר לכן אחלק לו ברבים ואת עצומים יחלק שלל תחת אשר הערה למוות נפשו ואת פושעים נמנע והוא חטא רבים נשא ולפושעים יפקיע. So Hashem says, well, that's where you want to go in because you want to fulfill the mitzvot. You only want to do it so you can get that spiritual reward for fulfilling mitzvot. You know what? I'll consider it as if you already did it, right? If that's your intention and you want so much to do mitzvot, you get rewarded, even though I'm not letting you go in. And we bring a pasuk from Yeshaya 53. This is the famous perek of the suffering servant. Christians love this chapter. They think it's talking about Yeshu. But this Midrash says, no, every word over here, as we're going to explain, is referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. As it says, I am going to give him a portion among the greats, Barabim, right? It's talking about Moshe, Ben Asumim, and the great and the mighty. He will divide spoil with them. In other words, he will get the greatest reward with the greatest of people. Why? Because he he bared his soul unto death. He was willing to die. And he was numbered with the transgressors, right? He went and helped and saved even those who were transgressing. He bore the sin of many and made intercession for transgressors, right? He was on the one hand righteous, but also did not leave behind those who were sinners. He went and helped them out, prayed for them, and put his own life on the line for their benefit. And all this is true regarding Moshe. It seems that this midrash could be understood by the rabbis living in exile themselves, who wish they could be in Eretz Yisrael, fulfill all the mitzvot of Eretz Yisrael, and it's a way of consoling, even if we cannot be in Eretz Yisrael right now, but because we want to, and we study these laws, even though they don't apply, hopefully we get the benefit of these mitzvot, even though we cannot fulfill them today. Okay, so now we're going to take this pasuk and atomize it. It says that, yes, this Moshe will get a portion among the great. But which great? You mean like the later greats that are not that great? Or like the early greats, like the Avot? Talmud lomar ואת asumim יחלק שלל כאברהם יצחק ויעקב שהן asumim בתורה ובמצוות. No, in fact, like the early greats, like Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, that they were mighty in Torah and mitzvot. Moshe will receive reward like them. Why? Because he bared his soul unto death. He gave himself over to death. For the sake of the Jewish people, when Hashem wanted to wipe them out after Chet Egel, he said, if you do not forgive the people, then erase me from your book. Meaning, right, Hashem, I would rather die than be the one person that continues the nation and you kill everybody else. So because Moshe put himself on the line and was willing to die for the nation, so he deserves this great reward. Bet poshe'im in Nimna, he was numbered with the transgressors. But that doesn't sound like it's good. Why would you want to be numbered with the transgressors? Shenimna'im mete mispad. He was counted among those who died in the desert, right? Because he was on such a high level. When he did even do a small sin, like we saw with the camel, right? So his punishment was that he would die with those who were in the generation of the desert. He bore the sin of many. He was not involved in Chet Egel, but he bore their sin, and he took it upon himself to atone and bring Hashem to forgive them. And Yafkiya means to pray. He prayed on behalf of sinners so that they would make teshuvah. אל תתפלל בעד העם הזה ואל תישא בעדם רינה ותפילה ואל תפגע בי. We know that the word paga means to pray, because we see in Yirmiyah, Hashem says, do not pray for this people. Don't lift up a cry for them. Neither make an intercession. Right? So Yirmiyah has a similar scene to Moshe, and both of them, Hashem says, stop praying for them. In Yirmiyah's case, right, it means is kind of hinting, well, if you do pray for them, then I'm going to have to do something about it. So, of course, anytime a Navi, Hashem tells Navi, don't pray for them, the Navi is going to go and pray for them in order to achieve atonement and get forgiveness. And so we end with this beautiful note of this long series of agadot about righteous people, starting with Miriam and Yosef and Moshe, a lot about Moshe, and the greatness that he achieved and the reward. And this is all a conclusion of the section of Midah Keneged Midah. Everything that Moshe did, he got rewarded for many times over. That shows the power of good, of Midah Keneged Midah for good, is many times that of for punishment. Hadran Allah Hamekane leishto. And so we saw many beautiful agadot. And now we're going to go back into the halachot. היה מביא את מנחתה בתוך כפיפה מצרית ונותנה על ידיה כדי ליגעה. So, once they're on their way and they get to Yerushalayim, the husband already accused his wife and she is a Sotah. So the husband has to bring a mincha offering made out of barley. And so he brings it because he's the one that is interested in figuring out if she's guilty or innocent and making her a sotah. So he has to bring this barley offering, and he puts it in an Egyptian wicker basket, kind of a cheap basket, and he puts it on her hands, right, his wife's hands, and she has to hold it the whole time. Why? In order to make her tired. As we saw before, we really want her to confess if she's guilty. And when a person is fatigued, then their will gets diminished, and so we make her go up and down and up and down, and also she has to hold this item for a long time, and hopefully, but she may say, "Oh, I'm sick of holding this. You know what? I did it," and that would be a good thing, because if she doesn't confess, then she's going to drink the sotah waters and come to a terrible death. If she does confess, then the worst that happens is she gets divorced and loses her ketubah. But she's alive. I mean, she'll go and she'll remarry and she could be okay. So, kol hamenachot techilatan v'sofan bekli sharet, vezot techilata bekefifa misrit v'sofa bekli sharet. Now we're going to compare the sotah to all other mincha offerings. So we'll learn a lot about other mincha offerings too. So regarding all other mincha offerings, we bring them at the beginning in a holy vessel, right? It means a vessel of the Bet HaMikdash is consecrated, and anything you put in a keli sharet becomes holy itself. Whereas, so it starts off and ends in the kli sharet regarding other menachot, but for a sotah, it starts off in a simple wicker basket. Only later on do we put it in a kli sharet. Other menachot require oil and frankincense, but for a sotah, no oil and no frankincense. These are all ways that the sotah offering is degraded, right? This is not an honorable thing that one is bringing for praise or for greatness, or, right? This is because of a sin, and so part of the degrading experience is that even the mincha offering itself is low level, so no expensive items like oil and levona. Kol hamenachot ba'ot min hachitin, zo ba min haseorin. All other, most other mincha offerings are from wheat, and this one is from barley. Barley was generally animal feed, and so this is a lower level of a type of grain. Minchat ha'omer af al pi sheba min haseorin hi hayta ba'a geresh. Now, there is another offering that is from barley. That's the omer that we bring on the second day of Pesach, because that's when the beginning of the barley season, right? That's when all the barley is ripe, and we can eat from the new barley of the previous year. So that is important. You have to bring it from barley. That's the whole point of it. But the barley that you bring for the omer is very fine flour. That's solet. What solet is for wheat, geresh is for barley. Whereas the sotah brings kemach, coarse, unsifted barley flour. So it's not only barley, it's even low-grade barley flour. Rabban Gamliel Omer Keshem Shema'aseh Behema Kach Korbana Ma'achal Behema. Rabban Gamliel explains the significance that just as her act was an animalistic act, if in fact she's guilty and she committed adultery, so too, therefore, midah keneged midah, she should bring a mincha offering out of animal food, meaning barley and not wheat. Tanya. Abba Chanin Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer v'kol kach lama kedei liyagea kedei shetachzor ba im kach achas haTorah al obrei resono kal vachomer al oseh resono. And the Braita of Abba Chanin learns an important lesson from this, that we make her hold it the whole time in order to tire her out, so hopefully she will confess. And look how the Torah cares so much even about someone who transgresses, that we don't want to, so even if she's guilty, we don't want her to have to blow up and die. We'd rather she confess and then she just loses her ketubah. So if the Torah cares so much even about someone who violates a law, all the more so those who follow the law, Hashem cares about them. Hold on, how do you know that the reason we want her to confess is because we care about her? Maybe it's because we care about Hashem's name, that it won't be erased. And that way, if she confesses before we erase before we won't, if she confesses, we won't have to erase Hashem's name, right? If she confesses before we prepare the water. And maybe that's why we want her to confess and we tie her out. Not because we care about her. We would say, she's a sinner, we don't care about her. Kasavar, mashke, ve'achar kach makriv et minchata di'i mishum megillah ha'imcheka la. And so we say, no, the point would be according to the opinion that says, first she drinks, and then she brings the korban mincha. We're going to see later on there's a machloket about the order. And so if we follow this order, that she already drank, so that the name of Hashem was already erased. So that doesn't matter anymore. Still, we go to a larger, to this extent, to ask her to convince her to confess, because, obviously it's not because we care about erasing Hashem's name, it was already erased, it's already done, but rather because we want a better outcome for her, because we care, the Torah cares even about the well-being of transgressors. Right? If it was for the Megillah, it was already erased. Okay, so now the Mishnah is contrasting the Sotah and other menachot, and said, for all other menachot, they, from the beginning and until the end, they are in holy vessels. Now we're going to bring a long beraita, a Tosefta, that seems to contradict this. And then we're going to analyze all the sections of this Tosefta. It's actually a very important Tosefta because it details the various steps for general korban mincha. Seder menachot kesad. Adam מביא מנחה מתוך ביתו בקלטות של כסף ושל זהב, ונותנה לתוך כלי שרת, ומקדשה בכלי שרת, ונותן עליה שמנה ולבונתה, מוליכה אצל כהן. So a person is going to bring the flour from his house, and he's going to bring it in baskets of silver and gold. Right? This is a nice, he wants to give honor to it. These are not holy vessels, but they're fine vessels because he wants to give honor to this flour that he's bringing. So when he brings it from his home to the Bet HaMikdash, he brings them in non-sacred vessels. When he gets to the Bet HaMikdash, then it's transferred into a holy vessel, and by transferring it into the holy vessel, it actually becomes holy. The Gemara is going to talk about whether you have to have intention to make the flour holy, or automatically, by putting it in a kli sharet, it automatically becomes holy. Okay, then you put the oil and the frankincense on it, and you bring it to the Kohen. Kohen molicha et mizbeach umagisha bekeren derumit ma'aravit keneged huda shel keren vedayo. And the Kohen will bring it to it's in the vessel, so he carries it close to the altar, and he brings it to the south western corner, and that's sufficient. We have a little picture here, right? So this is facing north, south, and here's the mizbeach. And so the southwest corner would be this corner here. Just brings it close to that area, and that's an important part of it. And that's all he has to do. And then he moves the frankincense to one side, and he does kemisah. He takes a handful of solet. He doesn't want to get the frankincense in there because it has to be all solet. This is talking about a general mincha offering that would be made out of fine wheat. And he takes it specifically from a place that has a lot of oil there. The oil is gathered there. He puts the komets into another holy vessel, and it becomes holy in that holy vessel. And then he gets the frankincense and puts it on top of the komets that's already in the second bowl, and he brings that second bowl up to the mizbeach, and he brings it up to the altar and burns it in the kli sharet up on top of the altar on the fire, and he puts salt on it, and he puts it on the fire. So salt is important because we know we have to put salt on every korban. The meaning of salt is that it's a preservative. So it stands for berit melach, that the berit should be preserved always. And so you see here, not only for animal sacrifices, but also for mincha offerings have salt on them. And that's the reason why till today, when we have bread, we put salt on it. The bread reminds us, like as if it's a korban on our table, that's like a mizbeach. And so although we don't have korbanot, we can still remember and keep the symbolism of the salt as a continual reminder of the everlasting berit. קרב הקומץ שיערי הנאכלים ורשאין הכהן ליתן לתוכה יין ושמן ודבש ואין אסורין אלא מלחמץ. Once the kohen on the mizbeach puts that kometz onto the fire, then the leftovers that's in the first bowl can be eaten by the kohanim. And the kohanim, if they want to make it tastier, they can put oil and honey, wine, oil and honey in it, even though you can't put honey on the mizbeach. But this, they're not putting on that, only the kometz goes on the mizbeach, the rest they eat. So they can put honey on the part that they eat. They just can't make it hametz, right? This is an all year round law that any korban that is brought on the mizbeach cannot turn into hametz. And honey would be a leavening agent because, right, you need the sugar and the honey makes the fermentation go faster. So that would be the reason why devash cannot be brought on the mizbeach. But if you're back at home, you can put some devash on it, even though even when the kohanim eat it on Har HaBayit, still they cannot allow it to be chametz. Right, so it's very important that this is an all-year-round law that you can never have chametz on the mizbeach, and this can explain the law of Pesach. It's not a coincidence that on Pesach also there's a prohibition of chametz, and this is a prohibition of chametz. The idea is that Korban Pesach, the first one, was brought not on an altar, but rather the blood of the first Korban Pesach was put on the doorposts of their homes. In other words, their homes became themselves like a mizbeach. So just like you cannot put chametz on the mizbeach anytime, all year round, on Pesach, one's home becomes a mizbeach itself, and that's why we have to go and get rid of all the chametz from our homes on Pesach. So I think there's an application for 7 days of this all year round law. Okay, that's the end of the Braita. Now let's analyze it. You said in the Mishnah that other korbanot, they start off in a klei sharet. But here, you said that, regarding other korbanot, they start off in silver and gold vessels that people bring from their home. So this is a contradiction. The Papa explains, no, it means that you bring them in vessels that are worthy of being holy vessels. You should bring it in something nice, like silver and gold. They're not consecrated. You bring it from your house. I mean, you have to get it to the Beit HaMikdash somehow. When you bring it to Beit HaMikdash, you should use, your finest bowls. So we can infer from this that since we contrast other menachot to Sotah, that the Sotah brings it in a simple wicker basket. So that means a simple wicker basket is not worthy of being used for korban mincha, to be like a keli sharet. Right, keli sharet has to be made of something fancy like gold and silver, and cannot be a wicker basket, and that's why the Sotah uses it, because it cannot be keli sharet. So Kiman, who would this follow? Who says that a wicker basket cannot be used as a klei sharet? Telaka Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda de Tanya klei sharet she'asan shel etz Rabbi posel Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda machshir. So our Mishnah could follow Rabbi, because he says that if you make a vessel out of wood, it cannot be used as a holy vessel. And so wicker is a kind of wood, made out of wood, and that's why it makes sense. So Sotah would bring it to show her degradation, and that's the contrast. However, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says you can make a holy vessel out of wood, and so it must be that our Baraita is not, our Mishnah is not the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. And we answer, no, afilu tema Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. We don't want to exclude anybody from being agreeing with the Mishnah. So Emad Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda bechashuvin bepechutin mi amar. When he said that yes, you can use wood For kli sharet, he meant fine wood, right? There was very fancy types of wood, but he never said that a cheap wood, and wicker would be a cheap type of basket. That he didn't say. Doesn't he know this pasuk? Obviously he does in Melachi, that you should never bring a low-level korban, something that is maimed, right, or spoiled, or a low degraded level as a korban. Even though Hashem doesn't eat it and doesn't care, nevertheless, you care, right? Would you present this to your own governor if you were giving something, a present to an important person, right? Would you give them a present of a maimed animal or something that was spoiled? No, you wouldn't. And you wouldn't also serve something in a cheap wick or basket if you were giving it to an important person. And so therefore, for ourselves, we should not present to Hashem something that we would not give to a governor. And surely the Biyoseh would agree with that, and would agree therefore that a simple wicker basket is not appropriate and cannot be klei sharet. So he can agree with our Mishnah that the Sotah specifically does bring it in a cheap thing in order to show the degradation of her korban. Now, for general korbanot, right, we put it in a holy vessel, and it becomes holy in the holy vessel. It sounds from this double language that you actually have to have intention, that when you put it in the holy vessel, right, you have to make it holy in the holy vessel. You have to have intention. Is that true? Not necessarily. At least there's not a proof from here. This can simply mean that you put it in the holy vessel, and by doing that, it becomes holy automatically. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have intention. And then, after you put the meal, the flour, then you put the oil, you add the oil and the frankincense. How do you know that? Because the pasuk says it in Vayikra. Perek Bet, it gives you all the details, and says you put shemen and you put lebona. Molicha etzel kohen, dichtiv hebia el bnei Aharon. And so then the owner is allowed to do all that so far, and then the owner brings it to the Kohen. As the pasuk says, you're going to bring it to the Kohen. And the Kohen then has to carry it over to the Mizbeach. As the pasuk says, he brings it close to the Mizbeach. Now, Magisha bekeren terumit ma'aravit keneged chuda shel keren vedayo minalan. How do you know that he has to bring it to the southwest corner of the Mizbeach? Where does it say that? Tichtiv ezot torat hamincha. The Torah doesn't say southwest corner. However, it does say that the law of the Korban Mincha is that you have to bring it lifnei Hashem, so before Hashem. Now, before Hashem means the western side. Penei HaMizbeach, the face of the Mizbeach, means the southern side. Let's show it on the map and we'll read it inside. To be lifnei Hashem, so Hashem would be west, because that's where the Hechal is, that's where the Kodesh Kodashim is. And you see the west, this is the western wall over here. Out here will be the western wall. So the western side of the Mizbeach is literally facing right in. There's nothing in between, right? If you're standing on the Mizbeach, you could probably see right into the Hechal. So the Lifnei Hashem part of it would be the western side. However, Al Peneh, the face of the Mizbeach, well, the front of it is where the ramp is. That's where you walk up. So that would certainly be the front, and that's the southern side. So this pasuk, we're not sure how to fulfill it, because on the one hand it says, Lifnei Hashem is west, Penei Mizbeach is south. V'tanya Lifnei Hashem yachol b'ma'arav, so this midrash is going to explain. Since it says before God, sounds like that would be the west, right? No, but then Penei Mizbeach means the south. So maybe it means just the south. But then it says Lifnei Hashem. It has to be west. How can you, what do you do? Oh, so the compromise is, we'll put it on the southwest corner. And that's sufficient, and then you fulfill both Lifnei Hashem and Penei HaMizbeach. Okay, good. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Yachol Yishena b'ma'arava shel keren, or lidroma shel keren, Amarta kol makom she'ata moseh shene mikraot. אחד מקיים עצמו ומקיים דברי חברו, ואחד מקיים עצמו ומבטל דברי חברו. Rabbi Elazar says, what are we going to do? Can we put it on the west? Marava shel keren, or the doma shel keren? Should we put it right? He wants to be more specific. Even though you say a corner, but which side of the corner? Is it going to be on the western wall near the corner, or on the southern wall near the corner? Right? You have to pick one or the other, because it's not, you can't put it exactly on the corner. It's going to be more, at least on one side or the other. So he says, let's see. Anytime, here's a general rule. Anytime you have in the Torah two pisukim that contradict each other here, or two phrases, as we have here. Now, and you can fulfill, you have option A and option B. Let's say option A, if you do that one, you can fulfill both phrases. Whereas if you do option B, you can only fulfill one phrase and the other one will not be fulfilled. Then which one should you pick? It's obvious. So you'll leave out the option where it will only fulfill one phrase, and you should do the option to fulfill two phrases. In other words, if possible, try to fulfill both phrases. Now, how are we going to do that? And now, if you do Lifnei Hashem and you do it on the west, then you're not going to be able to fulfill it being on the face of it on the south. So that's no good. But you can fulfill both phrases if you put it on the south side of the corner, and then you can fulfill also it being before Hashem. How so? We're going to put it on the south side of the corner. So vehechan kiyamta. Hold on. How does this help anything? Right? How did you fulfill before Hashem if it's on the south side? Oh, this Tana thinks that Rabbi Elazar thinks that the entire Mizbeach was actually to the north. There is a machloket in Masechet Yoma, precisely where is the Mizbeach? Is it on the south side, further south, in the middle, or is it in the north? Right. So one opinion says the entire Mizbeach is up here in the north. If so, right, let's say the Mizbeach is like where these are hooks that would hold down the animals when you're doing Shechita. Right, that's the Mizbeach was over here. That means the south side of the Mizbeach would be lined up with the opening into the Hechal. And therefore, since the south side is open, so if you put it on the south, on the south side, near the western corner, so then that certainly you fulfill Peneh, because it's on the south side, but because it's near the corner, and the entire Mizbeach is moved up, such that the south side can be seen, south side, when you're standing there, you can see right into the Hechal, and it's all the way on the corner, so therefore you fulfill both. And so that is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Okay, my vidayo. How come the Tosefta there says you put it on the southwest corner and that's it? What do you mean that's it? You might think that you actually have to bring the meal offering itself and kind of tilt it so that the flour touches the Mizbeach. It says, no, that's not true. All you have to do is bring the vessel itself, bring it close to the Mizbeach. You don't need the flour to be touching. It's enough that the vessel is touching. Wait, why don't you say, maybe in fact we do have to make the flour touch it? No, in the Pasuk it brings these two actions back to back. That you bring it to the Kohen, and the Kohen brings it to the Mizbeach. When you bring it to the Kohen, you're not giving the Kohen the flour. It's in the vessel. The Kohen's only touching the vessel, not the flour. And so too, when you bring it to the altar, you can leave it in the vessel, and you don't need the flour to actually be touching directly the Mizbeach. Okay, then he's about to do kemitzah, but first he has to take the frankincense. It's a little brick of frankincense, and he moves it to the side of the bowl. He wants to do that so that when he does kemitzah, it will be only flour in it, and not the piece of frankincense. Because the Mishnah teaches if the Kohen does kemitzah and there's a pebble or some grain of salt or a piece of frankincense, it's no good, because then he's missing that volume of flour, and he needs a full volume of a kometz of flour. And that's why he has to make sure that the levona is not picked up in the kometz. V'kometz makom shenitraba shamna min dalan dichtiv misotah mishamna migarsha umigirsha umishamna. And when he does the kometz, he should do it where the oil is gathered, as the pasuk says, from the solet and from the oil, right? From the groats, from the oil. So that means that you should do it where the oil is. Now it's already in a holy vessel, all the entire mixture, but he's going to take the kometz and put the kometz into another holy vessel. Why does he need to do that? It's already holy in the first vessel. Why does he have to make it holy in the second vessel? Dam af al gav de kadishte sakin besavar behema hadar makdish le bekle sharet hachaname la shena. Well, it's the same for an animal sacrifice, where the first step of an animal sacrifice is the shechita. The knife is a holy vessel, and just by starting the shechita with the knife, that makes the animal holy. Nevertheless, after you do shechita, you have to collect the blood in a holy vessel as well. Even though the animal is already holy through the knife, still the gathering has to be. So those two actions are parallel in a meal offering. Meal offering, there's no knife involved, but that first vessel is parallel to the knife, and the second vessel, the kometz, is parallel to the vessel that's gathering the blood. And so, just like with an animal sacrifice, we need the knife and the blood. We need the knife to be holy, and nevertheless the blood is gathered in a holy vessel. So to here, the kometz is also made holy in a holy vessel. And then he takes the frankincense and puts it on top of the handful. You take the frankincense from the bigger bowl and you put it on the bowl with the kometz, as the pasuk says explicitly. You take all the levona. You take the levona and you put it on the mincha part that will be offered on the mizbeach. And we'll continue with these instructions tomorrow's daf. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.